Hello, everyone. I am coming to you with the Chapter 2 overview. Chapter 2's, well, before we get into Chapter 2, I'm not feeling my best. I'm going to try to get over or get through this information without stumbling, but I'm probably going to do a lot of stumbling, and I apologize. I've already tried to record this video a number of times and it's come out terrible, so we're going to push through tonight, and I apologize if this sounds crazy. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, most definitely reach out to me. You can email me, you can message me, you can text me, you can give me a call, and we can work through whatever questions, comments, or concerns you may have. So on Chapter 2, lenses for conceptualizing problems and interventions, the person and the environment. So I'm going to also be reading some notes that I took when I read this chapter last week. So forgive me if I'm looking down. But anyway, pushing on. Social workers often refer to the person and environment approach, which can be found on page 24, which views the client's problems within the environmental context in which they occur. This is the cornerstone of social work practice. So basically what it's saying is that social workers look at everything. We don't just look at the individual. We look at the individual and we look at their environment and how the individual is impacting the environment and how the environment is impacting the individual. So case in point, if you walk into any social service clinic or nonprofit organization, whatever the case may be, when you're doing an intake, that intake is asking you what feels like to be 1,000,000,001 questions. It's asking you what your mama do, what your daddy do, how many people live in your house, do you live in a house, do you live in a car, do you live in a shoebox? They want to know what your health is. They want to know what your job status is, when the last time you had a job. They want to know everything about you from the rooter to the tutor. And part of this is because they want to know what you have. They want to know what resources you have. They want to know how they can help you. They want to know how much they can help you. And then at the end of the day, they also believe that all of that works together. All of that plays a part in your problem. And going further within the book, or in the context of this book, it states that theories in this approach tends to focus on the person's systems, which are interrelated aspects of the client's lives, which when considered together functions as an integrated whole. And this can be found on page 24. So again, everything works together, and that is why we want to know everything about you. The book gives an example of how your body can be considered a system due to all of its parts and how all of the parts work together to function. So your body can survive without a brain. You would just be brain dead. Your body can survive without a part of your lung, a part of your liver, without a foot or arm. With a low immune system. Even though all of these individual parts are great and can possibly function just fine, it functions even better as a whole. And all of these parts make your body, which functions exceptionally well when all of these parts are working together. But it doesn't mean that it cannot function without most of the parts. So that's an example, and that's how I thought about the example when I read it. Pushing on. Page 25 talks about the micro, meso, and macro, which are different levels at which people can experience problems. The micro, meso, and macro approach exemplifies the person and environment idea. This approach is not testable, but offers a visual framework. So, when thinking about micro, meso, and macro, I thought about two things. I thought about religion, and I thought about how I was raised. So I'm not going to talk about religion because that's controversial and I'm tired and I might offend somebody. So I'm going to do the lesser of the two evils and tell you about how I grew up. So I grew up being the only female other than my mom and my grandma in my house. It was a house full of boys. I'm the youngest of three boys. My dad was in my household. And within my block, within my neighborhood, I believe, yeah, I was the only girl. I was the only girl on my block. And so I had cousins, I had play cousins in social work and in sociology. We call that fictive kin. They were all boys. My father worked in construction. So a lot of his workers would come to the house and they were men. So I grew up around boys and men. So with that being stated, my family was very protective of me. So growing up, I did not have a lot of dates. I can only think about one, maybe two dates that I had. And part of it was because of who my family was. And my family, I don't want to say we were a big deal within my community, but we were known in my community. So I was not named, no one knew me by my name. They didn't know me as Ingrid. They knew me as Lil Kurt, Lil Clem, Lil Ike, or that's a Smith, or that's James' daughter, right? So when thinking about this or that context within the micro, meso, and macro levels, I think about it like this. So if a social worker would have approached a 16-year-old Ingrid or a 17-year-old Ingrid, I would say one of the major issues in my life is that I can't get a date. I can't have a boyfriend. And so the social worker would look at the bigger problem of why I can't get a date. And it wasn't because I was ugly. It wasn't because I wasn't popular. It wasn't because I had stinky breath. The social worker would have found all of that out through the 1,000,001 questions that social worker asked me through the intake process. What the social worker would have found out is that the system in which I lived in was the problem. So looking at this through micro, meso, and macro. Micro, she would say, my issue was because of my gender and my age. And I'm going to try to turn this video around. Can I do it? No, I can't. Okay. So, within this, yes. So on page 26, you will see the exhibit that I just tried to show you. That was a little, I don't want to say ghetto, but that was a little, you know what I mean. But anyway, on page 26, you have this diagram about micro, meso, and macro. So giving the example that I just gave you about me growing up and not having a date. So the social worker would say, the micro issue with this is of my gender and my age. I am a female and I am 16, 17 years old. And the meso issue would be that my family, the boys or the men in my family, they were suppressing their ideas or beliefs upon how I should interact with males. Okay, I just pulled that out of the air, but I think you get it. And they would say that because of my family's rules and regulations, it prevented me from obtaining a date. So the macro would be going back to community. So because my family has these rules, or because of my family's clout or presence, the community has fallen in line, and no guy within my larger community will date me because of the fear that my brothers have placed upon them. So the social worker um, would try to not necessarily work on me, but they would work on my brothers and my father in terms of asking them not to be so rigid about me dating other guys. I hope that makes sense. But that's how I break down micro, meso, and macro, little or small, medium, and large. So, pressing on. Page 28 also gives you other definitions for micro, meso, and macro. The micro, meso, macro approach is not perfect. It cannot be empirically tested and it is not structured. But the approach is still useful by helping social workers consider the myriad of factors that can affect clients. A key point of this approach is that it looks like it takes a look at how the environment has contributed to the client's problems. The client is not solely to blame for their issue. So when interventions are applied, they target the bigger issue, page 29. And like I stated, when growing up, I was around all these boys, all these men, and they was like, ain't nobody dating my little sister. So they put pressure on the community or pressure on anyone that would try to talk to me. And so the community kind of fell in line with the rules and the regulations that my brothers had. So again, when the social worker would come and do her assessment, or when he would come and do my assessment, he would find out, again, the macro issue is my gender and my age. The meso issue is my family. And the macro is how the community has interpreted my family's rules and regulations. So the social worker would see that I'm not necessarily the blame for my issue. I'm not the blame for not being able to get a date. And her intervention would be to the bigger issue, which would be trying to talk to my family, the men in my family, to not be so strict. You can find this all on page 29. I hope it makes sense. So, pushing on. The biopsychosocial approach, which can be found on page 30, breaks down human behavior into several components that involves a person's biological, psychological, and social functioning. Many social service agencies use biopsychosocial model to assess clients. This model is mostly used during the intake process. So I'm not going to go far and detailed into the biopsychosocial. Basically, what it is 1,000,000,001 questions. Well, not 1,000,000,001, but you know what I mean. It's a lot of questions asking people about, who lives in your house? Where do you live? What do your finances look like? Who are your parents? Are you well? Do you have an illness that we should know about? Can you read? What's your educational level? They want to know all of this information. And you can't tell me one agency that does not have a biopsychosocial or a form of a biopsychosocial that they use in their intake process. They even have a biopsychosocial when you go into the hospital. So biopsychosocials are important. That's how you get to the information that you need to have to understand all the other layers or the other parts in your client's life. I hope you get that. If you know of an agency that does not use some form of a biopsychosocial, let me know. I'd be interested to contact that agency and ask them why they don't use one. But most social service agencies, most hospitals, most health clinics, even school systems use those. So, or some form of those. But anyway, pressing on. The systems theory, page 33, views human behavior as a result of active interactions between people and their social systems. Systems consist of interdependent parts that, when combined, make up an organized whole. Over time, systems can become complex roles and rules. Over time, the systems can become complex. Roles and rules can change as systems grow and decrease. A system can be your family. Your family is a system, or vice versa. Um, Roles change when systems grow. So when my mother decided to have the second child, my oldest brother was no longer the single child or the only child, and etc. When I was born, my mother could no longer say that she has a house full of boys because now she has a girl. So systems change. When my grandfather passed away, it changed. I no longer had that extra authority figure to rule over or to give me advice or to help guide me. So systems change. The best way to view a family is in a system. I personally believe that a, that everyone at some point in time should diagram their family. I personally believe that people should know where they come from. When you know where you come from, you can kind of gauge where you're going. And that's just a personal belief of mine. I'm not pushing that on nobody. I'm just saying. And you can kind of also predict things within your life. But I'm not going to jump down that rabbit hole. But anyway, on page 36 and 37, they talk about genograms and echo maps. For your class discussion, you guys will be talking about genograms. So I'm not going to go too far into that. You can read page 36 and 37. It's pretty self-explanatory. It's pretty much a family tree. Pretty much. Anyway, ecological theory, page 43, explains human development by describing aspects of the individual, the environment, and the interaction between the two. The ecological theory argues that the ecological theory argues that people are actively involved in their environments and their own development, and that both development and environments are always changing. This theory also states that the way people perceive their environments and experiences significantly affect their well-being. Now, I can really jump down a rabbit hole with this one. And I do believe that what a person experiences in their environment can impact how they perceive things. So I'm trying to debate in my head if I should talk about this. And because I'm radical, I'm just going to touch on it a little bit. Okay. People are not born racist. You're not born a bigot. You're not born with hate. People are not born with that. People are taught that. Just like people are taught love, people are taught forgiveness, people are taught all those other positive things, as well as negative things. When you are born, you are pretty much born a clean slate in terms of thinking. But your environment reinforces or enforces or teaches you, it teaches you, then enforces, then reinforces those beliefs, those ideologies, and those behaviors. So when people say things, and I'm going to say, have you ever had a conversation and somebody just came out their mouth real crooked? You know, and you just kind of looked at them and was like, what? Come again? Say it again. Like somebody said something that was so, that it just made you, where you, and you, yeah, and you have that face. When that happens to me, I take a moment and I think about my audience. And then I think about what my audience has probably experienced for them to have that belief system, or to the belief system to say what they said, to think the way they thought, or whatever the case may be. Because it's important for me, because then it allows me not to get angry at them. I can be angry at their words and disagree with their words, but I won't subject my anger to them. I know that might sound crazy, but I'm just saying, for me, it allows me to give that person a benefit of the doubt. It allows me to excuse a whole lot of things so I don't become upset. So again, so I don't jump too far down as a rabbit hole. I think that a person's environment influences the way they think. It teaches them. It reinforces it. Because I believe that when people are born, when babies are born, it's a clean slate. And so they are taught love. They are taught forgiveness. They are taught value, morals, and beliefs. But they're also taught hate and discrimination and all those other bad things. So I'm going to leave it at that. I'm going to put a period right there and I'm going to move on. So the ecosystem approach, which is on page 49, you guys can read that. I'm not going to go into that. But what I am going to spend some time on is page 50, which is one of my favorites. If I had 3 favorites in this chapter, it will be most definitely page 50, when it talks about the strengths perspective. So that's one. The other one would be the genograms and the eco map. And then the other one would be the micro, meso, and macro. But anyway, going to page 50, the strengths perspective. So last chapter, I talked about having a theory in your back pocket. Well, the strengths perspective is one of my theories. I love the strengths perspective. I'm all about the strengths. I want to know, when a client comes to me, what are you good at? How do you feel you can help yourself? That's what I want to know. But anyway, the strengths perspective on page 50. It basically states that all human beings have a capacity for growth, change, and adaptation. This approach also states that people are much more than their problems, and that people are experts on their problems and can develop their own solution/intervention. Now, this does not mean that we should not recognize that oppression, discrimination, and other forces beyond the client's power or control can impact the client's issue. Okay, so there has not been one client that I have had in my almost 10 years of doing this that has not been able to tell me what their problem is and how they should fix it. Even if I didn't agree with their own solution, most definitely they had insight on what they thought could fix their problem. Now, I've had clients who felt like they didn't have a problem. And I'm not talking about those clients that were in denial. I'm talking about the ones who knew they had a problem and knew that they needed to fix their problem. I'm saying that I have not met one person who could tell me that they did not know how to fix their problem. Now, what I'm not saying is that the way they wanted to fix their problem was accurate and correct, because at the end of the day, I'm still a professional and this is what I do. But what I am saying is that when talking to a client, I do ask them, what is your problem? Or what do you think your problem is? And how do you think you can resolve this issue? And I listen, because if I don't listen to them, then they are not going to listen to me. It's a give and take. And also, when a client feels that they are invested in the solution or the intervention, then they're going to work a little bit harder. So, an example. And I was just talking about this lady today. So when I worked at the VA, I had this client that nobody wanted. I mean, this lady was like scarlet letter. Like, she had a big old S on her chest. Every time practitioners or providers saw her, they would literally run the other way. And I'm not joking about that. So I had her on my caseload, and she couldn't stay clean. One of her issues was that she was an addict, and she had every reason to be an addict from her environment. I worked at the VA, and she was an individual who had experienced some very brutal MST, which is military sexual assault trauma. Military sexual trauma. It was brutal. I don't know how no one would have been able to come away from her situation without some sort of mental health issue. Anyway, so she had an addiction. She had several addictions, alcohol being one of them, heroin being one of them. She had many of addictions. If I ran them down, we'd be here all day. Anyway, so she couldn't stay clean. So when I got her on my caseload, I just sat her down and I was like, look, you can't stay clean. What do you need to stay clean? What do you need? And she said, I need someone to check on me all the time and to be 100% honest with me. Even when I'm wrong, I need somebody to be honest, and I need somebody to check on me. I said, okay, roger that. So I was with the MICM program, which is Mental Health Intensive Case Management, and part of my job was to check on people like on a very regular basis, like multiple times a week. So me checking on her was not the problem, but me telling her the truth, even when she did not want to hear it, was a problem for her. But I told it to her, and I was constantly on her behind about the truth, about her spending habits. She was addicted to shopping, about meetings that she sometimes went to, sometimes didn't go to, about the people in her life, everything. And because of that hardcore honesty, she was able to obtain 60 days of sobriety. Now, some people may think 60 days, that's only a couple of months. You're right, it's only 3 months. But for her, that was a lifetime. And all because I listened to her and I listened to her and I listened to what she needed to help her solve one of her issues. Now, of course, she had other issues that she wanted to have solved one way. One of the things that she wanted to do was she wanted to go to a treatment program like in New York, and we weren't going to approve that. Partly because it wasn't because we didn't have the funding. It was just because New York was one of her hot spots, but that's another story. But again, strengths, perspectives. I sat her down. I asked her what she needed. I asked her, what is your problem and what do you need to solve this problem? And she gave it to me. So that's why I love the strengths perspective. I'm always wanting to know what the client can do to help them help themselves. Anyway, I think we're going to wrap up here. Yeah, the strengths perspective was one of the last things that, one of the last things in the book. So again, for this chapter, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, most definitely let me know. I hope this was some information that you could understand. I hope you got something from it. If not, let me know. If you did, let me know. Some of the things that you should pay close attention to for your midterm will most definitely be here, and I'm looking at my notes, would be the person and environment approach, page 24. Systems, on page 33. Yeah. I'm not saying all this other information you may not see, but most definitely I can tell you, I can guarantee that you're going to see something about persons and environment, and you're going to see something about systems. So anyway, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, most definitely let me know. I feel like y'all got a paper coming up. I'll look in the syllabus and I'll send you guys out a reminder. But that's it. Good night, everybody. Bye.